So, good evening, everyone. Good morning and good night, depending on which time zone you're in. Welcome to my ICHEP 2016 talk. I was supposed to give this talk in Chicago, where the conference is taking place, but unfortunately, I haven't received my visa as yet. So I'm going to be presenting it from CERN's main auditorium instead, with a slightly smaller audience than the previous ICHEP talk that was given from this room, which was 4 years ago, the announcement of the Higgs boson. But okay, without further ado, let's get to it. My name is Achintya Rao. My name should be flashing up on the screen right now. And my talk is on the attitudes towards outreach of the CMS collaboration that I work for. And I'm going to take you straight through. So we start off with the conclusions, which is something that I like to do. The talk focuses on two aspects of the collaboration's attitudes towards outreach and engagement. One is, what do they perceive to be the support structures for outreach? What are the incentives for performing it and so forth? In this regard, the respondents to my survey had a generally high agreement that outreach is important because most of the research that we do is funded by taxpayers. And they also had a high agreement that funding agencies should help scientists in order to communicate their research to wider audiences. However, few scientists feel that outreach plans should be included in grant applications, which is a fairly contentious issue that I've spoken to a few people about, and you can see it in the slides coming up. Regarding the benefits of outreach participation, there were a couple of distinctions that emerged in my data analysis. One is that there is a high agreement among those who responded to it that participating in outreach makes them a better scientist, makes one a better scientist. It also gives them a sense of enjoyment, and it also gives them, job satisfaction. That said, few feel that it attracts research funding. Okay, doing outreach attracts research funding, which kind of goes against the grain of the previous statement in that outreach should be done because it's taxpayers who are funding the research, but okay, we'll explore this later on. Few feel that it advances one's career, provides collaboration opportunities, or makes one think about their research in new ways. So a bit about me. One of the reasons that I started my talk in this reverse pyramid bottom line up front format is because I have a background in science journalism. I'm currently working as a science communicator for the CMS Collaboration at CERN. And I'm also pursuing a PhD in science communication from UWE in Bristol. If you haven't found a link to this slide yet, it's at the bottom over there to my talk. And you can also ping me on Twitter if you have any questions. Also, if you're watching this on Google+, there should be the option for you to ask your questions directly in the broadcast itself. So I'm turning that on now, and feel free to submit your questions to me. Right. Science communication has been evolving over many years as an academic field. If you look back to the 50s, there were efforts to measure the so-called scientific literacy of the general public, and it was believed that greater knowledge about the facts of science will improve people's lives while also simultaneously gaining support for research, right? And it will reduce opposition to research. So people should be aware of the facts and it will fix all our problems. This evolved over time into what is known as the public understanding of science and technology. Still has shades of literacy in it, but the focus is more on what the scientists should do. And the Royal Society's report from 1985, you can find a link to it if you click on that in the sidebar. So the Royal Society report from 1985 concluded that it is part of every scientist's professional responsibility to promote the public understanding of science. Now these paradigms are very much built on top of what is known as the deficit model, which is the belief that the role of the scientists and science communicators in society is to merely plug the knowledge deficit that society has, and that's pretty much it, right? So this model has been lampooned over the years, and we have slowly transitioned away from it. One of the reasons for this being that a group of scientists, two scientists rather, Stocklemeyer and Bryant, ran the same science literacy exams on scientists themselves and found that a lot of scientists got answers wrong, particularly about their own domains. There was various explanations as to them over-reasoning the answers and so forth. But what it demonstrated was that many scientists recognize in their own inability to be certain of their answers that public cannot be expected to retain facts that they have no interest in, right? So we have then moved on to what is known as the public engagement with science and technology model. And this suggests that while scientists may have the facts, depending on how science affects people's lives, they might have more of a stake in understanding it and might have a personal interest in it. So there are three aspects or stages of the engagement model, and they're not mutually exclusive. So initially, scientists were engaged to inform the public, they were engaged to develop dialogue with the public, and now there is the belief that scientists must engage very early on with the public about their research matters. But as you might imagine, this conversation is dominated by fields that have either a direct or an immediate impact on human life. Okay, the discourses usually come from domains like climate science, genetics, genetically modified organisms, and so forth, right? So these fields, or robotics, for example, these fields have either a direct or an immediate impact on human life, and they seem to be dominating the conversation to some extent. It's my perception. But what about fundamental research? The attitudes of people participating in fundamental research hasn't really been included in a lot of this. So this is where my PhD project comes in. If you click on that, you will also find a link to another talk that I gave recently about it, covering different aspects of the same project. But instead of looking at the term engagement, I'm looking at the term outreach. This is the term that I've chosen to define the entire context of engagement, mainly because this term is used by the particle physics community to refer to various activities, working with schools, having a direct dialogue with the public, disseminating information through the media, and so forth. So given the fact that CERN uses this term officially in their communications plan, the fact that there is the International Particle Physics Outreach Group and so forth, lends me to build my research using this term. I also had to include right at the top of the survey that I circulated that the term outreach refers to all science, communication, and educational activities that bring scientific research to audiences outside the research community. And you can see the last line over there, which is kind of important to stress, which is that it is also known as popularization. Now, this is a term that has fallen out of favor in the West, but is a term, well, rather in the English-speaking West, but is a term that is still quite popular, as it were, in other parts of the world. And I had to include this term, or some nationalities didn't know what the term outreach meant. My research questions, which I will dive into fairly quickly, are about the attitudes within the particle physics community towards outreach, and what are the motivations and barriers for participating in it. How do these vary with age, gender, academic position, etc.? How are these attitudes influenced by funding bodies, by national expectations towards outreach, the multicultural nature of international collaborations, and so forth? And how does the community perceive the usefulness and impact of outreach, which is kind of what I'm touching on in this presentation. So for sampling the particle physics community, I have chosen CERN for a variety of reasons. For those of you who don't know, CERN is the European Laboratory for Particle Physics. It is based in Geneva, Switzerland. It is the host laboratory for international collaborations. And CERN estimates that approximately half of all the 20,000 particle physicists in the world work here. So it makes it a nice place for me to perform my sample. And at CERN, we have the Large Hadron Collider, which is CERN's flagship project, the highest energy particle accelerator ever built, results of which are being presented at ICHEP as we speak. And my focus of research is towards the left corner of this ring in this image that you can see, which is CMS. This is a small sample of the CMS collaboration. It is, in fact, one of the two teams that discovered the Higgs boson, the announcement of which was presented in this room 4 years ago. And as of June 2015, had 4,000 physicists, engineers, and students from 183 institutions, universities, and laboratories from over 40 countries. There were also more than 80 nationalities represented in the collaboration. So for collecting my data for this stage of my analysis, I circulated an email to the entire collaboration. It would not have been possible for me to perform a census of all 4,000 plus people, plus having a random sample chosen that I have to then go and expect everyone to respond to would also have been tricky. So it was decided that a survey would be circulated to everyone in the collaboration with reminders sent as well. So the internal mailing list was used for this. 3 reminders were sent to the whole list, and engineers were reminded separately as well because they had a slightly lower response rate. And finally, representatives from low response countries were reminded separately. Overall, I got slightly more than 400 responses, a few of which were duplicates, so I had to reduce it to 391, which is kind of 10% of the collaboration. And these are the countries that then responded. So at the bottom, you can see that the US had one of the largest numbers in terms of just raw numbers of responses, because it is, I think, about a third of the CMS collaboration. And in blue, you can see the percentage of the respondents. So US, Italy, Germany are just slightly less than 10. Belgium is just about 10%. CERN is slightly more than 10% as well, and so forth. So I had to somehow look at this range as a given and then focus on the others, which were kind of my low response countries. So let me show it to you here. So, right, so everything from Finland, Russia, Ukraine, etc. These were countries that had a very small number of responses. So I'm trying to think about how I can group these countries together in order to perform an analysis in the future. Right. Now, coming to the participation in outreach, this tells you a bit something about the levels of bias in those who responded to my survey. So most of those who responded to this survey had at some point participated in outreach, okay? This itself is something to bear in mind, to weight whatever analysis I make out of it. Previous surveys that have been done on a similar topic did not have such a large number of people responding who had previously participated in outreach, right? So this changes the way in which the data have to be interpreted with here. On the right-hand side, you see the number of men who responded. Left-hand side, you see the number of women who responded. In terms of support for outreach participation, I've already given you the conclusions, but let's take a look at the slides. When asked if it is important for scientists to take part in outreach because taxes from citizens fund research, an overwhelming number of people showed strong agreement, which is what you see on the right-hand side. Strong disagreement is conversely on the left-hand side. When asked whether funding bodies should provide support for scientists to communicate their research, once again, there was strong support for this idea. But when asked if plans for outreach should be included in grant applications, there was slightly less enthusiastic response. Still a fairly high number, I would think, but fewer agree with that than disagree with it or have no strong feelings about it. And if you look at the first two graphs that I showed you here, so it's important to do it because taxes from citizens fund research, and funding bodies should help scientists. This is an alluvial plot that compares the responses for one question with the other in terms of how the people responded. And it's kind of amusing that a small number of responses, which is here, who didn't feel very strongly about the fact that we should do outreach because it is funded by citizens, felt that funding agencies should nonetheless help people communicate their science. So this is something that I might explore in my qualitative phase. Finally, regarding the benefits of outreach participation, and I have just a few seconds left. When asked whether it makes one a better scientist, as you can see, many people agree or strongly agree with it. When asked if it gives them a feeling of enjoyment, very strongly agree with it once again. And bear in mind, these are mostly people who have previously participated in outreach. So, and whether it gives job satisfaction, slightly less than just pure enjoyment. Once again, if you look at the alluvial plot on the left-hand side, I get a feeling of enjoyment from participating in outreach, and participating in outreach gives me job satisfaction. It's mostly, in this case, mapping fairly evenly. When asked whether it attracts research funding, no strong feelings about this. Some felt maybe it's slightly leaning towards agreement, but really no strong feelings towards this. When asked if it advances one's career, doesn't seem like it does, is how I would conclude with it. And when asked whether participating in outreach opens up the doors for collaborating with other people, once again, no strong feelings. And finally, participating in outreach does not really make people think about their research in new ways, which is to some extent not entirely surprising. So with that, once again, I'll take you through my conclusions. Regarding support for outreach participation, there was high agreement that outreach is important because taxes fund research, and funding agencies should help scientists communicate their research to wider audiences. However, once again, few feel that outreach plans should be a component of grant applications. Regarding the benefits, there's high agreement that it makes one a better scientist, gives one a sense of enjoyment, and gives one job satisfaction. But the respondents didn't really feel that it attracts research funding, advances one's career, provides collaboration opportunities, or makes one think about one's research in new ways. So with that, I would like to just acknowledge a few people who have supported me during my research, and also link you through to the various tools that I've used for building this presentation in HTML5. And you can find it also, my slides on GitHub. Thank you. And before I go, I just want to ask Zoltan to turn the camera towards himself, because Zoltan has kindly, Zoltan and Noemi, in fact, have kindly shown up here on a Saturday evening to help me broadcast this to you. No, no, go back, Zoltan. Okay, Noemi's there as well. If you can turn and wave, there she is. And Eva for being my one audience member. So yes, thank you, all of you for coming. And so I have one question. Could you please explain more why it's not surprising outreach doesn't make people think about their research in new ways? Okay, this is an interesting question, and I should probably have worded myself slightly differently, but one of the components of one of the elements of the engagement argument that is presented often for doing communication with outside audiences is that you get perspectives from outside of your immediate field, which can help influence the direction of your research. An example of this is that comes to mind is from the field of I think this was arthritis, but I might be wrong. But it was from a biomedical field in which people were surveyed, patients suffering from this were surveyed, asking them to rate how much pain they're in every single day. Okay, so they were given the survey and they wanted to rate how much pain people experience. So the respondents then said, oh, I experience this much pain per day or experience that much pain per day, so forth, right? But in preparing the survey that was circulated, the patient groups themselves had not been consulted. And so what they ended up missing was that the biggest symptom that those patients feel was in fact fatigue, not pain. This was not considered at all because people had not spoken to those patient groups. And if they had done that kind of outreach, that kind of engagement with wider audiences, they might have thought about their research in a different way. I think to some extent, fundamental research is a bit too far removed from the daily impact of human life that talking to someone about quantum field theory might not necessarily make you think about quantum field theory differently, but I might be wrong. This is again something that I would like to explore in my qualitative research, perhaps, as to ask them why they feel that way about it and to see whether we can use this research in other domains as well. So that was a question from Hugo. And I'm going to also check if there are any questions coming in from Twitter before I decide to end the broadcast, because I have 3 minutes of questions. Right. Nope, no questions. So I would like to thank those of you who have watched for watching and enjoy the rest of ICHEP 2016.